I'm just still trying to figure out how to use this new laptop. Yep. JasmineJafar.me is the spot to go. I'm going to wait till I see people say hi. Hi, Messi is the best soccer player. I think I remember you from Thursday or last week. Wait for a couple more people. Let's go. King of the Hun is in here. All right, perfect. So today everything's back to normal. Monday fun day. Good evening. How are you? I'm okay. I'm not 100% yet from my episode last week. Some of you guys were here for that. It'll be a week tomorrow, like around this time. So I'm gonna be honest. I've also not been like, as soon as I start feeling a little better, I try to go back to normal, and then I like fuck myself. So, but I'm definitely still not back to normal. But hoping that like over the next few days, I'm going to try to do everything right. And if I'm still not back to normal, I might go see if I need antibiotics or something. But for the most part, I'd say I linger between like 60 to 85%. Also, I didn't end up dying or going to the ER. Surprisingly, last week, I made my own remedy to keep me from losing it. Well, please share. What are lost connections? We're going to talk about it. What's the OF? Go to JasmineJafar.me, and we will be live there at 8 p.m. Pacific. So we're going to be on here for about an hour and a half, a little under. And then I'm going to go on there and we have fun. We get naked. We do a lot of stuff over there. But that'll be at 8. JasmineJafar.me will have the link not only to that, but to all my other socials. What's my ethnicity? What do you think? Guess, although everyone else in the chat probably knows. Okay, so I want Hazard to be in here because what we're talking about today is something that me and Hazard, it's a book me and Hazard have been reading for a while now. It's actually taken me a while to get through it, although it's a really easy read. Yes, I do still feel sick, so it's not fun. But the book is called Lost Connections. It's by Johann Hari. A few months ago, I want to say, we did that episode on Tim Kasser's research on values. And we kind of did it when it kind of was in relation to kind of the red pill stuff we kind of touched on last week about chasing materialism and kind of the ideology that's pushed on kind of all of us through social media, but specifically like put on a pedestal by these type of online characters like Andrew Tate, etc., that are telling you that, you know, having 200 Bugattis is like the way to live your life and it'll make you happy. So we touched on this book and an interview that he did. But since then, me and Hazard Stint in particular have been kind of reading it and talking about it together. And I think it's a really good book for a number of reasons. I don't think it's the end all be all. I don't think that there isn't any further inquiry or research to be done. But something that we hear a lot about is that more and more people are reporting not being happy. More and more people are reporting that they are on antidepressants. This is usually used by the right wing to be like, see, we need to go back to traditional values. Women are depressed more because they don't have husbands like us and they don't have children. When one, correlation and causation, I don't think these people know much about that. Just because A and B are happening at the same time does not mean A caused B or vice versa. And it's probably not that, because we do have research that indicates that at least with children actually don't seem to make you happier. We also know that unmarried women live longer. But irrespective of that, I think it is true to say that we feel a lot of us are more disconnected now than we have been in the past or than other communities. And something that is emphasized a lot in Lost Connections and in kind of any book on any type of research done on happiness and well-being is meaningful connections and meaningful relationships are 100% pretty much like the key to living a happy and good life, which again is not something that's usually pushed by the alpha male ebook world. It's sad to say, but in a way, it almost seems like the conservative, like religious nut jobs, have something's right in the sense that they do emphasize family and community and things like that. However, that doesn't have to be exclusive to them and their values, because I don't agree with their values, and I think a lot of it is really terrible. But they're not wrong when they say that connection and family are important, and that's more important than like kind of just pure hedonism and chasing just material wealth for yourself and yourself alone. And this is a great reminder to me, because I definitely am somebody who could be doing things in my life that bring in more of that community and those relationships. But we're going to go through the connections that Johan talks about in this book that he feels like is missing from people's lives and is causing them to become, I guess, sometimes get clinical depression, anxiety, but also just not feel great and can prevent us from living the best life that we can live. So as the medical consensus is that there is a biological, a social, and a psychological component to depression. And I think that is true, at least as we know it for the most up-to-date current research. For a long time, people described it as a pure chemical imbalance in the brain. Completely, that was it. You go on antidepressants, you're supposed to be cured. And he talks a lot about in this book how that is not the whole story. And antidepressants actually don't work for a lot of people. A lot of people actually don't necessarily need them, and they're going through something, or they're missing things in their life that's actually causing them to be unhappy. Okay, let me look at some of these comments really quickly. I saw that. Lebanese. No, I'm Persian. I get Lebanese a lot, though. I learned that foods that pregnant women crave are good cure. So all things with salt, slavery, also pickles, rising. Today I've had crackers, bananas, blueberries, and bread with a little bit of peanut butter. That's literally it. Yesterday, so what happens is if I take an edible, I think like, ooh, and I tried to have McDonald's, which was so stupid because I woke up today and I'm like, and that was probably why. What's up, chatters? Hey, treacherously is in here. Depends on one's outlook. People really just need a sense of belonging. Hello, everyone. I hope that you're all doing well. We're glad you're here. Antidepressants often just make people more depressed. So Johan has he was somebody that was on antidepressants for a very, very long time. And he thought they were helping him. And he was like a big advocate for them. And then when like they would stop working, he would just increase his dose. He went through all of that. And then he talks a lot about how, in this book, how the research on antidepressants was largely influenced by people trying to sell it, right? Big pharma. Not to say that there is, and he does emphasize that, not to say that they don't work at all, and there's no reason to believe that, like, they're not just pure placebo, but there is an element of them that seems to be, and that they help far less people than they made it out to seem, I think, at least previously. I think now more and more doctors are realizing that it's not just, you don't just walk into an office, I'm depressed. Oh, it's a chemical imbalance. Here you go. That isn't the way to really get at the issue. And we're going to talk about some of the things that he thinks, and I agree, are causing these disconnections in people that's preventing us from living, that can make us depressed. And you can look at what you identify with. I definitely know that as I was going through some of these, I identified with a lot of them. I've never had clinical depression or anxiety, but I don't think this book is just geared towards that. But it could be. What's your McDinks order? I can't talk about McDonald's. I'm not trying to throw up. My moderator says we don't have many good longitude. Guys, I can't say that word. Studies for antidepressants either, so it's hard to gauge the efficacy long term. That's true, and he did talk about some research in this that's pretty alarming when it comes to antidepressants, done by doctors who used to prescribe them, and then saw this research and was like, oh my gosh, like this isn't working the way that we have thought it's been working. A lot of people will just go back to being depressed. It won't work. It'll work temporarily for kind of like that placebo effect, but usually and Hazard had like highlighted some really good quotes, and I read the book pretty, like, I just read the physical book, like I didn't highlight or take notes, but he had some really good passages in here where it's like a lot of times our depression is a natural response to our lives. It makes sense that you're depressed. Nothing's wrong with you, but you're living a life, a lot of us are, that the only natural conclusion is that we feel the way that we feel. We don't have connection with other people. We are disconnected from meaningful work, from a multitude of things that we'll talk about. So it's like the natural response. Nothing's wrong with you for being quote unquote depressed. Nothing's wrong with your brain. And this isn't to say that there isn't a genetic component at all, or there isn't a biological component at all. But in the chapter where he talks about that, he notices that if you have a genetic predisposition, then some of those things will make you far more likely to become depressed. But a lot of the time you need like a triggering event or a number of events to bring about that predisposition. It's kind of like with a lot of things. Like we always ask, like, oh, are like serial killers, is it like nurture or nature? A lot of times you have genes that are dormant that can be triggered by the environment. So even if you do have a genetic predisposition to it, a lot of times there are other parts of your life that are causing those genes to be triggered and make you depressed or anxious. It's not just, it's far less likely than doctors made it seem when these antidepressants were starting to become hot on the market, that if you were just like a normal person and like you could just wake up one day and everything, you have connection, you have family, you have meaning, and then you're just like, oh, my brain just screwed up. That's the picture they were selling for a long time. And then they called that like depression, and then they called like acute depression if you were depressed after the onset of like some type of event in your life, which that's still true, but it's not that cut and dry. Also, everyone's brain chemistry is so unique from one another, it would seem a blanket approach would have low success rate. Yes. The underlying issues of widespread societal depression is rooted far more in underlying issues that can't be addressed in one doctor's visit, much less a therapy session. This is true. Trying to get proper mental health treatment is like a 4 to 12 month. Yeah, not just our healthcare system in America is very, very fucked. I can't imagine what I'm lucky enough that I have, like, just even the other day when I was having my food poisoning, I knew, like, I couldn't imagine someone being in that position and having to think about how they were going to pay for care. It's crazy to me. It's so hard to diagnose people properly. We're not at the level with psychology and medicine where we can test most disorders on a molecular level. That's true. And I do believe we have an over-medicating problem in America. Like, I think ADHD is like the new thing where everyone's like, oh, I have ADHD, here's Adderall. And you don't even have to go see a doctor now. After COVID, you could do telehealth and like, we have an Adderall shortage now because every person saw on TikTok a video that's like, do you have trouble focusing? You could have ADHD. And they're like, oh my God, I have trouble. Like, everyone has trouble focusing. I have trouble focusing. I have ADHD. And then they take these drugs, and that isn't always the best thing for your body, especially when it's something like Adderall. Not saying that it's never useful, not saying that nobody should be on it, but it's not just like, we're not just handing it out like candy bars whenever somebody says that they have trouble focusing. It's cool you're interested in depression, anxiety when you don't experience much of either. Always good to be aware of these things. Yeah. So I don't experience anxiety. Now, this doesn't mean that I don't have situational anxiety, but I've never struggled with it like on like a big, like, like having an anxiety disorder, and neither with depression. But that doesn't mean that I do think I struggle right now with loneliness, in the sense of I work from home. I'm naturally introverted. And so my impulse, my default is to want to be alone and want to be kind of isolated, and it's not good for me. And I notice that, and I do get lonely, and I do need to find a sense of community and being connected with other people. That's my number one thing I need to work on, which we'll talk about. But yeah, I don't think I've had like clinical depression where I don't want to like get up out of bed for more than like a couple days if something happened. Pretty much all our health systems are pretty well odd at times. Yeah, most people are just one health problem away from poverty. So I've heard, I didn't check the stats, but I've heard multiple times that medical care is like the number one cause of bankruptcy in America. I agree. Kind of physical medical care. We need a better system of urgent crisis mental health resources that can transfer to longer term care. They are affordable and available. Yeah. So I've gone to just like face-to-face therapy before. To me, I love just like talking about my, like for me, it's very easy to do that. So if I'm ever going through like a little like part where I'm like, oh, I just want to talk, I just want to get my feelings out, I just go to a therapist and usually just pay out of pocket like for like a few sessions, and they're like $360. And that is not affordable to like to most people. Like that's not even worth it. Like if I wasn't like making really good money, I wouldn't pay that for 90 minutes of talking to somebody. Even though that's really helpful, it shouldn't be that much. Self-diagnosing is so common on social media, too many armchair experts. It's useful to be more aware of different mental illnesses, learning modalities, etc. Yes. Loneliness is rough. I lost my closest friend 111 days ago. My days and nights have gone silent since she passed. I am so sorry for your loss. We all are. That is unimaginable. And she's always going to be with you. And we hope that you can grieve and then come out of your grief when you're ready and go on to live the life that she would have wanted. Talk therapy is statistically more effective for women. That doesn't surprise me. It's very effective for me. So Hazard Stint knows this. I solve my problems by vocalizing them. And I could vocalize my problems and problem solve as I speak for like hours. And I don't want to put that on people. So I'm like, okay, I'll pay you to listen to me figure out my own problems in my head. But that, again, and we'll talk about a lot of the stuff in this book, like, especially when it comes to severe things or childhood traumas and stuff, this is something that you're going to want to talk to like a professional about. And I haven't had a lot of those like deep rooted childhood traumas, etc. Although people assume because I'm a sex worker, like I've had like, and honestly, I've been lucky enough that, I mean, all our parents fuck us up to some degree or another. Like I can't sit here and be like, oh no, but like in general, I had 2 loving parents. They never like verbally, physically, like, none of that happened in my childhood. Was never severely bullied or anything. So but that doesn't mean I don't have my own problems. I'm crazy in my own ways. Not to say anybody's crazy, but you know what I mean? Yes, this can start on the community level with social services and being offered by local professionals and qualified volunteers. Yes. Oh, I said makes sense. Thank you. Okay. So the book goes through 9, kind of 8 ways we're disconnected. And then part 3 is about getting reconnected. So 8 and 9 are both about the real role genes play and the brain changes. So again, that one I'll go through really quickly. He does talk about how some people are more genetically predisposed to depression and anxiety. But again, the big takeaway is that a lot of times it takes that plus other things to actually make you that way. And the brain, there's something called neuroplasticity, which means that your brain, it does not stay the same. Your brain's kind of plastic. And we've talked about before how a lot of times your brain is the most plastic after something bad happens, after you experience failure, etc. So people who are like, oh, depressed people's brains are wired differently. That's true, but you can also rewire your brain out of depression by doing certain things and getting the treatment that you need, and maybe reconnecting with some of the things that we all need as human beings in order to do that. That is very powerful. And Hazard Stint, Hazard's read the book. Please chime in whenever, because you've read the book. I'm just going to sit back and listen for the most part. I have some, but not an extensive knowledge on this. I'd rather learn. Yeah, for sure. Does the author talk about the genetic factors of trauma responses? He does do a whole chapter on, what chapter is that? Yeah. Oh no, that's the wrong part. Disconnection from childhood trauma. Yes. And I didn't go, like, personally, when I was reading this, I didn't know I was going to do like a whole thing on it. I didn't focus super heavily on that chapter because that one doesn't apply to me. I would recommend this book for everyone. It's a really easy read too. Or even if you guys just want to, he's done a great interview on Diary of a CEO. He's in 2 interviews, and I would suggest people go listen to that. He talks about Rat Park, which I've told you guys before. It's the study they did where they had like the drug water and the regular water and a bunch of rats who had nothing to do, and they would all drink from the drug water, and they all like overdose themselves like in whatever in a few weeks. Whereas then they had a rat park where they had everything that they like needed. They could play with the other mice, they could have sex, they could whatever, and they had regular water and the the drug water, and like they didn't drink from that. They wanted the regular water. He also wrote a book called chasing the what is it? He did a whole book on addiction and how to get out of addiction and the real truth about addiction, which I haven't read, but he actually said that was his favorite book. So if you're interested in that, if you struggle with addiction or anyone in your family does, I think that would be a good read. He's a great author. This is my first time watching your stream and it's good. Thank you, Pablo Gomez. Here's a quote from the book. Yes. Can we put up, what if depression is in fact a form of grief for our own lives not being as they should? What if it is a form of grief for the connections we have lost yet still need? So I think he ends with that too. I just finished the book because I wanted to finish it before I came on here 30 minutes ago. And he ended it with, I'm trying to see where I should read this. Yeah, so he talks about you need your nausea, you need your pain. It's a message, and we must listen to the message. All these depressed and anxious people all over the world, they're giving us a message. They're telling us something has gone wrong with the way we live. We need to stop trying to muffle or silence or pathologize that pain. Instead, we need to listen to it and honor it. It's only when we listen to our pain that we can follow it to our source, and only there, when we can see its true causes, can we become to overcome it. So your depression and your anxiety is telling you something, and it's not telling you that something is wrong with you. It's telling you that something is wrong with the way we kind of all live, not just you. And a big theme of the book is that it's not you and you're in this isolated thing alone. Big part of the book is finding those connections. So the cause 1 is disconnection from meaningful work. So I'm going to go to that thing and see, just like skim through it. But basically, he talks about one guy in particular. Hazard, where did he work again? And this chapter really spoke to me because it spoke to my life as a lawyer before I started doing this. And as I was reading this chapter, I feel like I'm not disconnected from meaningful work personally because of these streams, because I have the opportunity to come here and do this, that I feel I like my job. And I will tell you, even though I'm more disconnected now from people and there's other issues that I struggle with that I didn't struggle with when I was a lawyer, having a job that I love and that I find meaningful has been great. And when he talks about the reconnection part, he talks about how it doesn't mean that, everybody quits their jobs and that's not feasible for everybody. But he talks about unionizing. He talks about having a more cooperative, democratic style job. Because he talks about in this chapter how the more you feel like you have control over your job, the more you feel like you matter at your job. So, and I'm going to find the study he pointed to, because he talked about how they, let me see. he went like all over the world and talked to all different kinds of people and doctors. And okay, so here's the study. They had one early hypothesis based on everything they'd seen. Could it be, they wondered, that the top civil servants have more control over their work than lower civil servants, and that's why they're less depressed? It seemed like a reasonable guess. Think about your own life, Michael said to me when we met in his office in central London. Think of your own feelings. Where you feel the worst about jobs and probably life is when you feel out of control. There was a way to find out. This time, instead of comparing people at the top, middle, and bottom, they compared people within the same civil service band, but whose jobs differed in how much control they had. They wanted to know if someone on the middle band more likely to get depressed or have a heart attack than another person on the same middle band who has more control. They returned to conduct more interviews and gather more detailed data. What Michael found when he did was even more striking than the first results. It's worth spelling it out. If you worked in the civil service and you had a higher degree of control over your work, you were a lot less likely to become depressed and or develop severe emotional distress than people working at the same pay level with the same status in the same office as people with a lower degree of control over work. This kind of reminds me of recently we found that there was like a study that showed that people are happier with their jobs since COVID because they have more flexibility on when they're in the office, having a hybrid model. I know we have people like Elon Musk saying that it is immoral to work from home now. But having that degree of control, having the ability to feel like your work matters, have your input matters, are the people that are so people that have jobs where they're just inputting data into the computer, people who have those kind of menial, that doesn't mean like I actually like those kind of menial tasks, but having some level of authority over your job and your life seems to significantly decrease the chances of you being depressed. He talked to a guy who worked at a paint store doing soul-crushing rudimentary work. The guy dreamt of taking a pay cut, moved to Florida, and become a fishing guide. Yeah, but he didn't because of the pay cut, which we can talk about later. Are the previous episodes of this podcast on YouTube? Yes, it's on Thoughts with Thoughts. The author sounds like he is in so, oh my gosh. Hazard, how many places has Johan gone? How many people has he talked to? There is a chapter in this book that made both of us cry. It's called We Built This City. It's about a city in Berlin, which was just this place for all the rejects from all different walks of life. So there was really religious, conservative Turkish people who were kind of outcasted from the people in town. There was a lot of the gay LGBTQ folks were there. Just all of the like outcasts, but outcasts that like had nothing in common with each other. So they kind of all just were isolated, poor place to be. But then the wall came down and the rents were rising. So one woman put a sign on her door that she's just going to kill herself because before she gets evicted. Just as like a final fuck you. She didn't talk to anybody. She just stayed home. She was like, and enough people kept stopping by it because they all kind of felt the same way, but they didn't talk to each other because they didn't find much in common. And the rest of the chapter was about how this city came together and they would protest and they would stand in front of the doors and stop other people from getting evicted. And they would do protest shifts together. So all of a sudden you have a really conservative Turkish Muslim person next to a gay sex worker and prostitute, and they would talk to each other and they would realize a lot of the similarities in their experiences. There was a guy, like a random homeless guy, who came and started joining them, and then they eventually found him a place and he became like part of their family, and then the cops came and took him back to like an insane asylum. But a lot of those symptoms he was having was cured when he was around people that cared and supported him. So they all went there and they demanded that they release this inmate because they're like, no, he belongs with us. We're his home. And they've really changed not only their circumstances, but they built a community and they all started feeling at home, and that depression and that mood just all lifted from them coming together. Like, it was such a crazy chapter. Hazard and I both cried reading it. It's called We Built This City. It's the chapter before he starts talking about how to reconnect with society. Again, if you guys, I would recommend reading this book. Oh yeah, he's been in so many places and studied a wide variety of communities. His research on a self-sufficient Amish community is very revealing about our need for depending on each other more. That chapter I can't wait to talk about because I just read that earlier, and this is something that I've been thinking about for so long, especially like what I just mentioned when we're talking about the religious communities. And he talks himself about how he um like was so shocked being there, because I mean Johann kind of, at least for me, grew up very like he's like me. He likes the city, he doesn't like nature. He likes McDonald's, you know, all of that. And so seeing like the Amish and how they live is like so unappealing to him, but they have far lower rates of depression, anxiety, etc. And he talks to people in the community. So I didn't know this about the Amish, but apparently, at least for some of them, once they hit a certain age, they have like a certain amount of time where they can go out into the regular world and experience everything. Like, because, you know, Amish don't have technology. They don't, like, you know, they can go to strip clubs all of a sudden and watch TV all of a sudden and stuff. And then you can choose whether or not you want to be Amish or not. So that's kind of why the Amish are less cult-like than other communities where you don't have that. And 80% do choose to return. And when he was talking to them and interviewing them, they said things like, yeah, you know, I miss TV and I miss this and I miss that, but overall, like, this is better. Like, you have more connection here. People talk more here. People are more, you never feel alone here. You have community. And this is something I hear religious people say that I think is so true. And we can't let them have the fucking market on this. And this is what I want more of people like us with our values to get together and say, hey, we can make our own communities. We can have our own tribes, because they're right in this sense, but we don't need to bring in their ideology with them. Because Johann agrees. Like, he's like, but at the same time, you would see like a woman like trying to escape an abusive situation and nobody was really helping her because the expectation is that you submit to your husband. So I actually screenshotted this because this is exactly what I've been thinking about for a really long time. In this, I wondered an inevitable trade-off? Does gaining individuality and rights inevitably undermine community and meaning? Do we have to choose between the beautiful but brutal togetherness of the Elkhart Lagrange, I guess that's where it is, and the open and depressed culture of Edgware? I think that's where he grew up, in London, where I grew up. I don't want to abandon the modern world and go back to a mythical past that was more connected in many ways, but more brutal in many more. I want to see if we can find a synthesis in which we move closer to the togetherness of the Amish without suffocating ourselves or turning to the extreme ideas that are often abhorrent to me. To get there, what would we have to give up and what would we gain? So this is true to me. It's something I've been thinking about. Like, these communities are great. It's great that people are communities. Even people who argue for the nuclear family. The nuclear family alone doesn't bring this. It needs to be like a community where people feel like they know their neighbors, they know everybody, they get together on multiple occasions. And it seems like religious communities do this so well, but I don't want to be in a religious community, and I'm an atheist. And so I don't want to give up my values in order to go live this way. Obviously, you will not catch me in a Mormon community or being Amish or anything. So what can we do as people who don't have those values to bring that community and our tribe together? I'm here to spread positivity. I love you all. Hazerson, I'd like to meet this author one day about his research. Oh, I would too. Okay. Oh, sorry. The Amish he studied weren't ignorant of the outside world either. A lot of them spent time in normal society before finally deciding to commit to the community for the rest of their lives. Yes, and they said, they're like, yeah, it's a trade off. We're trading, and I'm and like Johann mentioned, does it have to be a trade off? Like, why? Like, you know, and he talks about in some ways like kind of, yeah, because not Johann, but the guy said like, well, yeah, because the fact that we can't use like cars, etc., means that we can't all live super far from each other, which means that we know all our neighbors and we're closer because of it. I think it's going to take more. Their design creates community by default. I think that's what it is. Whereas our design doesn't, but that doesn't mean we can't create those communities. It just means we have to try, and we have to go outside ourselves, and we have to do all that cringy stuff. Like, in my mind, it's like, join a club. I was like, oh, I don't want to join a club, but those things can and do work. He talks about, when we talk about being disconnected from relationships, he talks about how there is a facility where one of the doctors said, okay, I'm not just going to prescribe antidepressants anymore. He's going to do social prescriptions. So when you go, it's not like he just hands you pills. He has a bunch of different, you have to join one of these, like you're basically assigned something. And there was a woman who was severely depressed that he talks to, and a couple other people from this group in particular, where they're forced to join this thing where there was like a really like just terrible, like really aesthetically not pleasing area by the park, and it was their job to garden and to make it something where people wanted to come walk by and see. And that them working together, having to problem solve, having to get together, speaking to each other, starting to feel comfortable enough to talk about their problems while doing something with your hands, especially getting your hands in the dirt. Those things changed like pretty much everybody in that group's life. And the thing is, most of us don't think to do that, you know? My moderator says, just the way the U.S. is set up with suburbia being the main living situation is so isolating. That and the elimination of third spaces makes it difficult to be with people. It feels like there are many barriers to entry than ever just to being with other people. Yes. So social media too, like a lot of us feel connected because we're on social media, but it's not the same thing. I think groups like this can be really good. And I'm going to talk about why too later on. But we also do need face-to-face interaction. But just meeting once a week and talking about stuff like this can be really impactful and can make us feel connected. But a lot of social media, which we're going to talk about when we talk about the values, just flexing this and flexing that and how rich are you and blah blah blah, those things are making us feel worse. Yes, I think they call it a rumspringa. Is that how you say it? I don't know what it's called. I'm very ignorant when it comes to that community. The only thing I really know about them is like legal cases where they like don't want to give their kids like medical care, and then it's like, when does the state become involved? That's kind of like the extent of my knowledge. The book is a lot like talking to him. He has a very conversational style of writing, and that still thoroughly covers a lot of research material. I will second that. Like, he weaves in stories and interviews with studies and research. So he'll go from talking to an individual person who has a life story or a circumstance that many can relate to, and then like next paragraph talk about how, or the next section, like he'll kind of split it with like these little things, and then kind of using that, he will then go into work he's done with a professor or a researcher in a study that was done and what the results showed. He does a lot of that. Agreed. There are a lot of different kinds of Amish in my area. They are very normal folks. They live specifically. It can be good and bad. The closed nature of their communities allows for child abuse. Yes. Spousal, grape, etc. I heard grape is the new word we're all using because we can't say. Walkable cities and mixed-use zoning are also important. We don't have a lot of that in the U.S. So he also talks about like the idea that, just go sit in a park, just be around people is not going to cure your loneliness. I think Hazard sent me a quote about this that I really liked. Loneliness isn't the physical absence of other people. It's the sense that you're not sharing anything that matters with somebody else. So just like, how many of us have been around a bunch of people and you feel really alone? So we have started to believe that doing things alone is a natural state of human beings, and that's the only way to advance. We've begun to think, I will look after myself, and everyone else should look after themselves as individuals. No one can help you but you. No one can help me but me. These ideas run so deep in our culture that we even offer them as feel-good bromades, I don't know how to say that, to people who feel down, as if it will lift them up. So yeah, we need each other is kind of like a big thing in this book, and seeing the circumstances in different times where people have come together and it's changed so much of their lives was like such a touching part of this book. Do you have a new Instagram? Your old one doesn't work great. I haven't had my old Instagram since like January. Jasmine, what is happening to your life? You keep on lagging a lot today. Is that true? I hope not. Yeah, work. So back to work. Work that is boring, soul destroying. So when people when your work doesn't feel like it's a part of you, when you feel like you're just going there and you're doing a task that kind of anyone could do separate from you, you don't have a lot of control, you're just going through the motions. He talks about how that is something that makes people feel extremely depressed, and he uses a lot of examples of when people regained a little bit of control or anything, that changed things a lot. So he uses this example of what was it bikes, like people who were, and they decided to open their own. And even though, and I will attest to this, you kind of work more, like I kind of work more now, but you're so much happier and you don't have that anxiety that so many people have of like, oh, is my boss mad at me and blah, blah, blah. When you kind of can do things to change your work environment. There's studies that show that when workers unionize, they become happier and they feel like they have power. They've regained some power in their, sorry, my phone is like going off, in their lives. What's your new Instagram? I have two, so I have a backup and like my one that's got verified. So it's just my name, Jasmine Jafar, and then Jasmine.Jafar. So, what is this? So then we have cause 2, which we've kind of been talking about, disconnection from other people. So as we've, in a way, we're on the internet, we're more connected than ever, but we're almost less connected than ever. And he talks about how, I don't remember how many years ago, if you were to ask people, how many close friends do you have? And people used to say 5 was like the average. Now the answer is mostly 0. People don't feel like they have anybody that they can really depend on in an emergency, that's their friend or somebody that really cares about them. And this is making people, not surprisingly, more and more depressed. Yes, bike shop workers asked their employer to let them unionize, and he hired a lawyer instead. So they started a co-op instead, and their morale went up a lot, even though they were doing the same amount of work. So yeah, and he talks about how when they do look at employee satisfaction in companies that kind of have this top-down approach, like it's like this automatic assumption that we all have where there's a boss and the boss tells you what to do and that this is the way to run a company, when if you have a more democratic nature where anyone can share their ideas, anyone can, a lot of times those are the people that have the best ideas because those are the people actually doing the work. And he talks about that. And a lot of times it's no, you do what your boss says, and you can't go to your boss and say, oh, I have an idea, this could work better, you just do what you're told and you hope your boss doesn't yell at you. Not surprisingly, this leads people to become depressed, especially since we spend so much of our life at work. Most of us, you're spending a significant amount of your time at work, and if work is not a meaningful, and that doesn't mean that like every moment, and they talk about that too, doesn't mean you have bad days, doesn't mean that every moment is just rainbows and fairies, but having that sense of control and respect and status at your job can make a huge difference when it comes to depression. Crazy. What is this book called? I'm enjoying the deep exploration of it. It is by Johann Hari. It's called Lost Connections, Why You're Depressed and How to Find Hope. You don't have to be depressed to read it. I wasn't depressed. I saw his interview and I thought he was marvelous. I thought he was such a cool person and I agreed with everything he was saying. So that's why I read the book, but that's what it's called. And I know Hazard really enjoys it too and has recommended it to others. He actually started reading it after I did that one episode kind of talking about how I was going to read it, and we've kind of been reading it together since then. So the disconnection from other people is huge. So I think that is one reason why, even though we have so much more in the West and we don't experience a lot of the struggles that people in other more collectivist cultures face, we can learn something from them by, sorry, my messages are popping up on the screen, by having, they're together. They're like, I will say this, like, my dad is in the Middle East right now, and he was even saying, because there's been times where I'm like, oh, I don't know what's wrong with me, like I don't feel, and he's like, you're lonely. He's like, if you lived over there with all your cousins and all your aunts and uncles and you guys are always down each other's throats, like I wouldn't like that either. I like my alone time. But he's like, people there don't get like depressed like this. He's like, yeah, people are really struggling to survive. The government is obviously trash in Iran. People have so much economic insecurities, et cetera, and that is making people really sad. But he's like, nobody's like lonely. Like, he's like, people don't experience that. Like, everybody knows their neighbors. Like, you have usually a bunch of family members and you get together at your aunt's house on Fridays and you hang out with all your cousins and stuff. And those things really, you don't realize it every time you're going to do it, but that's how human beings we have this evolutionary desire to be a part of a tribe and to be around other people. We're not meant to be isolated and by ourselves. And loneliness is associated with so many diseases, illnesses. One thing that can actually tell you how long you'll live is like people who live really long and live and retain their cognitive abilities for longer are people who are like when they're 85 years old and they call their friends on the phone all the time. Like, those people having connections, speaking to people, having conversations with people keeps your brain sharp. It improves your cognitive reserve and it prevents you from being lonely. And loneliness Hazard knows too. It's not just, oh, I'm lonely, okay, whatever. It's like a mental thing. No, it can kill you. It can lead to so many illnesses, so many diseases. It is a disease. Loneliness is a disease. I think that's even something Mother Teresa said. So let's see. Crazy that workers collectively owning the means of production can foster better morale and mental health. Yeah. Lost Connections by Johann Hari. So I wrote the name of the book or my moderator did. The one true friend I would have is Jasmine, everyone in this chat. Well, we are your friends, but we hope that you, and this is, you guys are my friends. I have some other really close friends, but I don't have a lot of that face-to-face interaction, that community, and finding just activities that I like and being consistent about going and trying is something we should all work more towards. And I think it's great that like COVID has brought about some changes in that more people have more control over their work and they can do like a hybrid or whatever they want when it comes to remote working. But a lot of issues have also arisen since COVID because people, like we talked about last week, how much gun violence has gone up because of COVID. And I think you could say, okay, that could be because of increased economic insecurity, et cetera. But I don't think that to say that people being isolated and alone hasn't been extremely damaging to our mental health. Social isolation is not like, why do you think people cannot last? There was that thing on Twitter going around where like there was like a padded room and people were like, oh, could you stay here for 1 year if you were to get $20 million? And anyone that had any that were just not completely uneducated about how isolation like erodes the brain, like there's been experience, you last like 48, 72 hours. Like you start going crazy. You start having physical issues. You start losing your ability. There was that guy who was in solitary for years and he can't even, his sense of direction, his vision, like so much stuff is fucked now. He gets lost in his own neighborhood because we're not meant to be creatures that are isolated. Back in the olden days, if that happened to us, we'd be dead. We had to be with our tribe. Now, one thing I think we can rejoice in is that now we can choose our tribe. And that's why we have this desire to be liked, this desire for everyone to like us. But, it's 2023. Not everyone's going to like us. And there are a lot of the people that don't like you because like you're a sex worker or you're gay or whatever. Those are not people that you need to be part of your tribe. But you do need a tribe and you do need to find those people. It's much worse in retail and service industries if your boss or manager is a tyrant. Those kinds of bosses demand respect because they truly believe they're better than people than their workers. And when the employees aren't making a living wage or being respected as human beings, it totally leaves the working class defeated and deflated. Yeah, so poverty is highly correlated with which we'll talk about in a different disconnection, but highly correlated with depression and anxiety. And a lot of times people in poverty are more likely to work these kind of jobs where they lose that sense of control, agency over themselves and their lives. And that it's soul crushing. It's soul crushing. And then people are like, well, why are they depressed? Oh, it must be a chemical imbalance. I think this book really points out, why wouldn't somebody be depressed in this situation? If you're spending a good chunk of your life in a situation like that, being mistreated, having no control, feeling like your voice doesn't matter, feeling like you are replaceable at any moment, being abused by your higher ups, wouldn't anyone be depressed? You know, so these are all little things. So this is that was connection number one, that like I was looking at my life. I was like, this is how I felt when I was working at my firm. I would wake up every day and I didn't want to go there. I didn't want to do it. It was like just but then he talks about how a lot of us, you know, and he's not the only one, that people could take even less money. Like, yes, you need enough money to survive. And I'm not speaking to like people in the chat who are like, you know, barely making it. But like, there are a lot of people, like if we look at lawyers, a lot of them are fucking miserable and they're making 6-figure salaries. A lot of them could take it. And we, even in the world of law. So if you're in big law, you're making the most money, but you're fucking miserable. Like our friends in big law, we have not seen them for years. Okay. They're billing like 250 hours a month, like, and they're making like $50,000 more. Whereas my friends who are like, you know, public defenders, even making 80 grand, have a lot more free time, agency. They feel like their work is more meaningful. Yeah, they're getting paid like half or less of what the people in big law are, but that pay cut is making them happier. But so many people feel like they have to chase as much money as possible. So that's one part of it. So in the book where he talks about the fishing guy that Hazard was talking about, and he's like, oh, I just want to go and fish in Florida. And he's like, well, why don't you? He's like, well, because I get paid so well here and I can't, and I want to buy this house and I want to buy this car. And he's like, okay, but you're happier doing that. And it's like, no, like we're so attached to the material things. And I'm one of those people, I will admit. So I'm lucky that I found a job where I actually make more and it's more meaningful. But for a lot of people, you give one up, and a lot of people don't want to give up the money, even though the money and the extra things, yes, you need enough to survive. But we talked about this before and we'll talk about it again. Past a certain point, if you reduce the square footage of your house, and you like, there are rooms that people, I have rooms that I'm never gonna, there's rooms in this house that I've been in twice. Yet I even spoke to Hazard about this ever since I got this place. And I was living below my means for a long time. And now I'm like living kind of at my means. I am stressed all the time because you just need to maintain it. You just need to keep it up. And like, for what? It doesn't make me any happier, to be honest. Everybody should be in a labor union. Okay, let me see what. Miss some stuff. When I'm old, I want to be like that. I'm grateful you accepted me as a friend, Jasmine. You're welcome. Of course, I'm glad to be your friend too. You nailed it. Worked in retail, and my ex was in the service industry, and I would jokingly say that we should create an industry-wide union. Thinking outside yourself, trying to come together with other people and fight. Like, I really want to get involved in that more with sex work. I think that's a way I could become more connected, is join a local sex work advocacy chapter in my area. And again, these things are all like, when you're in the moment, you're like, yeah, I'm going to do that. And then you just put it off, not realizing how detrimental that is to your mental and then also physical health. From the book. Okay, we have a quote from the book. Feeling lonely, it turned out, caused your cortisol levels to absolutely soar. As much of some of the most disturbing things that can ever happen to you. Becoming acutely lonely, the experiment found, was as stressful as experiencing a physical attack. It's worth repeating. Being deeply lonely seemed to cause as much stress as being punched by a stranger. Thank you, Hazard, for putting that in there, because those are exactly the kind of things. Because I started this book like forever ago, and then I read another book in between, didn't read for a while. So like, especially that earlier stuff was so impactful, and I wish I had time before the stream to like go through and find that stuff, but I didn't. And so really appreciate you putting that out there. So, and then he goes through a bunch of studies and how people having that being so disconnected from others. Like, he talks about even his own family. They went from like when he was young, from somewhere where people just like everyone knew each other, and then in the new neighborhood, like people didn't even know their neighbors. And like, most of the places I lived have been like that. Like nobody kind of talks to their neighbors, like suburbia. Like when I was growing up, me and my like next door neighbors, we were friends with their kids, but like I had no idea who lived on that side. And like maybe somebody who lived across the street. It wasn't, I didn't grow up in that kind of community. Here, I haven't even seen my neighbors. Like my neighbors, I don't think they're here. Like they're definitely not here. I have no idea who the fuck they are. I want to start advocating for increased workers' rights, period. I feel like all industries are not prioritizing human rights or well-being. Very true. And I think if anyone is the perfect person for that, it's Hazard and a lot of the people in here. So chapter 3 or cause 3, disconnection from meaningful values. This is what I talked about on the stream before because he focuses a lot on it in that interview that I watched prior to deciding to do the stream on it. But this one is a huge one and one that I feel like I don't struggle with it like immensely. Like I can easily rationalize myself out of it, but it's a big one in the sense that it's one that we all face, and it's kind of what can like cause us to search for, like for me, like it's like why am I partially so materialistic? And one, he talks about intrinsic values versus extrinsic values. And the study shows a professor, Tim Kasser, who did like studies on this. And not surprisingly, the more you value things that Andrew Tate tells you to value, which is wealth and status and material goods, the more likely you are to become depressed and anxious. And the more you focus on extrinsic goals, like I want to be a multimillionaire, I want to do this, the more likely you are to be depressed and anxious. Social media is making us more depressed and anxious in this way. The more you focus on intrinsic things, the happier people are. And again, none of us are hearing this and we're like, oh, what? I thought it was the opposite. But having concrete science kind of tell us what is almost intuitive, but yet we all still like watch this stuff and I want that, I want that, I want that. He talks later about when he's talking about the reconnecting, people getting in groups and talking about why do you buy the things you buy. Now necessities, you're like, oh yeah, because I need it. But once it's like brands, it's like, why are you buying that brand? And then it all goes back to a sense of wanting to belong, a sense of whatever. And I even think about that because I buy a lot of designer things. And why do I do it? You know, that takes some introspection, and having things that are intrinsically more important to us be our motivating factor. Like a lot of us, and we all know that when people are like, what's important? No one says, oh, my shoes. People say my family, my friends, but so much of what we're chasing is hustle culture, capitalism, buy this, buy that, buy advertising. Johan is pretty strict on advertising. He talks about how there are certain cities that banned like street advertising or whatever. And a lot of the people started feeling happier because pretty much advertising is telling you why you suck and why you feel bad, and how to buy this XYZ product is going to make you more likable, more fuckable. Like he used an example of like, oh, are you ready with your beach body? And it shows somebody that like looks like 0.01% of the population. And so if you don't look like that, the insinuation is you were not beach body ready and you need to buy X, Y, and Z product to feel that way. He talks about a study, I think I mentioned this on the other stream, where you have a group of kids and there's one group is shown a commercial with a toy and the other group isn't. And then they show two kids. One kid has the toy and the other kid doesn't. But they tell them the kid that has the toy is really mean and you can only play with one of them. Do you want to play with the kid with the toy who's really mean and he's a bad friend? Or do you want to play with the nice boy? The kids that had just seen that commercial chose to be friends with the mean boy just because he had that toy. And the kids who weren't shown the commercial chose the nice boy. And that's just kids seeing one commercial. Imagine how much of that all of us are exposed to every day. And I am speaking to myself. I 100% out of you guys in this chat and me, I am number one, the person most affected by this. I want this. I want that. I need to have this car. I need to have blah, blah, blah. And I've been like that and I think part of that just stems back to my childhood. I wasn't allowed. My parents were strict. They didn't like me to go out and do things because they thought I would die. So they were just like, oh, okay. You know, they let me kind of spend a lot of money and buy. So I had nicer things than a lot of the other kids. But I couldn't hang out with them. Like if they were all going, I couldn't go on sleepovers. I couldn't go do this. I couldn't go do that. But it's like, oh, but they still like me because I have all these things and that's cool. Like, I think that's kind of where it stems from me. But again, like now that I'm older, like how long do I want to live with those childhood feelings? And let me see. Hey friend, I would love to subscribe to your private page, but I can't now. Would you be a kind friend and give me a 1 month free trial? I don't give out free trials to my OF just because you're in here. I don't feel like that's fair to ask. I saw a study that said we are exposed to 6,000 to 10,000 advertisements per day. It can be crazy overwhelming. Yeah. And with social media, the advertisements aren't even like advertisers. It's each other. It's each other. Like you're following people who are advertising, oh, here's my yacht, here's this, here's that, here's my life. They're advertising this lifestyle of luxury, wealth, status, etc. All things that the more you focus on, the more likely you are to become depressed and anxious. And all of us are exposed to that all the time. Unless I am. I don't know if you guys are all following like the super wholesome pages. Thank you so much for hitting the source from the book. I'd love to read it online if it's available for free. I think there's like an audio version that's like on YouTube. When I looked, but don't quote me on that. The book is worth it to get, in my opinion. I don't know how long it is. What's wrong with your lips? They're just so sexy. Hi, everyone. I randomly discovered you from Instagram and I like your mindset a lot. Thank you. We do this every Monday. We talk about different things. We were going to do Supreme Court, the whole Supreme Court stuff today. But because I was finishing this book and I knew Hazard was almost done with it too, and we'd been talking about it so much together, I'm like, this is stuff that can be, I know every single person in this chat can take something from this book and implement something from this book. Unless you, even him himself got a lot out of this and he wrote like, no, I don't think there's anyone who's going to be reading this like, oh, I have no room for improvement. There's nothing I could be doing to live a happier and healthier life. And, or at least just know or be more educated on depression, loneliness, etc. Did you get stung by bees on your lip? No, my lips are just sexy. Where did you find me? Instagram, and then you came here? You must think I'm hot. Okay, next. This is not for you. You are too far gone at this point. This is for people who are at least sane enough to like, I don't think you read at all. So let's kick him out. All right. Number 4, cause 4, disconnection from childhood trauma. So this is the one that we talked about a little bit. So he starts off, I remember this part distinctly, going through like extreme weight loss programs and why so many, and then there was like basically like an Ozempic type of drug, and people would take it and lose a bunch of weight, but then like they would put back on the weight. And it's like, well, what is it? It's not just that you're gaining all this weight because, you know, even when you're given a way to keep it off, it's like people wanted it on. And then as he started talking to them, he realized that a lot of people in the situation, they were putting on that weight to cover up or to cope with childhood trauma. So there were women who were trying to be as fat as possible because they had been sexually abused as a child, and they wanted to just become super unattractive to men because they thought that way people wouldn't hurt them if they were just really unappealing and unattractive to men. There were other reasons that people gave in the same program as to that pointed to why. So it's like there's something Johan says, and he says it at the beginning, or it's at the beginning of that interview. He says you have to stop asking people something. If you have to start asking people what happened to you. Hold on, I actually can pull it up really quickly because I remember it was like the highlight of the first second of the interview. I recommend people watch that. I will pull it up. Yes. So yeah, Diary of a CEO, Johann Hart, Everything You Know About Happiness is Wrong. It's like at the very beginning.
The most effective strategies for dealing with depression and anxiety are the ones that deal with the reasons why we feel so bad in the first place. We need to stop asking what's wrong with you.
Okay, yeah, we need to stop asking what's wrong with you. We have to start asking people what happened to you. And I think that's just good for all of us to know and think about. Yeah, the way marketing has infiltrated almost every aspect of our lives is scary. I found myself explaining to my kids that what they are seeing is ads and they shouldn't believe it all. Yeah, and it's even scarier in today's day and age because of social media. And it's not just, your kids watching a show and then like, I feel like when we grew up, like we would see the ads for like toys and I used to be like, oh my God, I want like Polly Pockets or, whatever. But now it's like TikTok and just seeing like other kids unbox their toys is like a big thing. I can't even imagine being a parent. My hat goes out to all of you parents in here that have to deal with the abundance of advertising at your fingertips, right? It's not just on a TV anymore or just in the Target aisle. Capital and corruption has spread throughout. Banhammer. Yeah, what a unhinged individual. So childhood trauma can make you far more likely to experience depression, anxiety, etc. if you do not address those issues, which again is not anything that any of us hear and think, oh, I would have never saw that coming. Use Brave browser and uBlock Origin to block ads. Good. So for me, like it's just social media. And I think for me, the big thing is looking within myself and being like, why do I want this? What am I trying to do with this? Why am I buying this? Why do I buy the things I buy? Why do I want the things I want? What really matters to me? And then looking at the things that really matter to me and being like, how much am I focusing on achieving these goals versus monetary gain, etc. I believe that some people are programmed by capital commercialism. You're the best sports fan because you have every item to be the most popular, get all the action figures. Yeah, of course. The fact that most people don't even disclose that they are making an ad in YouTube videos or in social media is insane too. Yeah, I just had a phone call today with somebody who wanted me to, like, you guys, if you guys ever see me do a brand deal, it's going to be for like Skims or something that I wear all the time. That, because like they were like, oh, can you like do a thing for our AI program that, and I'm like, well, what does it do? And they're like, oh, we help people, we help you follow, like an automatic tool to follow all your expired fans and to talk like you. And they were trying to tell me that you could personalize based on people's OnlyFans spending, how much they're likely to pay for your videos so that you could give everybody an individual price that I'm like, no. People aren't going to be charged more for the same video just because they spend more on OnlyFans. I'm like, excuse me, we will not be partnering. For me, I just help my family as possible before I buying something for myself. That's nice. For my kids, it's YouTube videos of unboxing toys or integrated ads and videos with small ads in description. That's why I don't let them watch YouTube unless I'm in there with them to stop and explain to them. Thank you. I mean, I think you're an amazing parent. That's the thing. It's not always don't watch it and censoring. It's explaining, because your kids are not going to be able to get through life without seeing this stuff. And if you're there to explain to them, hey, these people are getting paid to show you this. This isn't the normal experience of kids. And a lot of kids most kids do not have what we have in the world. And you needing those, like, just starting to educate them as young as possible. So they're not like me, 28, being like, well, why do I want, like, as sooner we can do that, the better it is. And in the kind of social experiment Johan talks about, where people were getting together once a week and they were going through their extrinsic, intrinsic goals, and they would get together next week and they would talk about what they did to pursue their intrinsic goals. They realized a lot more people took time off if they could and spent more time with their family. A lot of them learned a new instrument, took on a new hobby. Like, these are things that make us happier that we don't focus on. It's always like hustle, 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 hustle. How do I hustle? How do I make more money? That's a great YouTube Kid might be a good option too. Yeah, I think YouTube Kids is a good option to stop like kids from seeing inappropriate content. But I think YouTube Kids is filled with ads too. I mean, what's better to advertise than like children? Like, when we were growing up, yeah, that would, like, if I saw something I wanted, I would fucking be in the store like, Mom, if you don't want me to embarrass you and throw a fit as a 3-year-old, give me that toy, you know? So kids are a really great way to advertise, because kids just want the toy, and if you don't get it for them, they don't understand why other kids have the toy and they don't. I do like YouTube Kids, and that filters. There's, yeah, okay. So Drizzle which Drizzle's real name is Drake. He told me that I can share that. Drake just said what I was talking about earlier. So disconnection. Cause 5 was really was really telling to, like, really interesting to me, because especially because of the examples that he used. So cause 5 is disconnection from status and respect. So this kind of goes into the first one, but it's a little different in that people who are on the lowest ranks of society when it comes to poverty, when it comes to being a part of a marginalized community, how much that eats away at people and makes them depressed. And even when thinking about some of the stuff that I like combat so hard, like incels, etc., but first trying to get rid of and not think about all of the ways they manifest their anger and sadness and depression. A lot of them are severely depressed. And how they manifest that, which is wrong, and that's not to be justified. That initial feeling of being so low status. So he talks about how people in, they were looking at, what were they looking at? Some kind of monkey, but I want to get the exact monkey. Just baboons? Oh, okay. I think I might read it if I can find the whole thing. Okay, so there was he was looking at a researcher named Robert. Robert would wake up in his tent every morning at 5:30 to the sounds of an awakening savannah all around him and prepare a medical kit and a tranquilizer dart. It was his job to go out and fire a tranquilizer at one of the baboons so he could take a blood sample. So these are just baboons. They became quite skilled at avoiding him, and he had to figure out how to fire when they weren't looking to dart them in the back. The blood sample would then be tested for several key factors, and one was how much of the stress hormone cortisol, which we talked about earlier, they were carrying. He wanted to know which baboons were experiencing the most stress because he believed it could reveal something crucial. It turned out, when his blood samples were tested, that when there is a war for the position of alpha male, the most stressed baboons are the ones at the top, but the vast majority of the time, the lower you are in the hierarchy, the more stressed you are. And the baboons at the very bottom of the pile, so he was looking at a bunch of baboons, and there was one named Job who was at the bottom, and he even talks about how he would walk around like kind of showing a lot of the behavior that we see in our normal like lives from depressed people who seem slouched, they seem low, they try to make themselves small. His head hung low. To avoid getting savage, the baboons with the lowest status would have to compulsively show that they knew they were defeated. They would do this by making what are called subordinate gestures. They lowered their heads, crawled their bellies. It was how they signaled, "Stop attacking me. I'm beaten. I'm no threat to you. I give up." This is how the baboons would not get picked on, the ones at the lowest rank. And here's a striking thing. Yeah, this is what I was just saying. When a baboon is behaving this way, when nobody around him shows him any respect and he's been pushed to the bottom of the pile, he looks an awful lot like a depressed human being. He keeps his head down and his body low. He doesn't want to move. He loses his appetite. He loses all his energy. When someone comes near him, he backs away. So Robert has discovered that our closest cousins are most stressed in two situations: when their status is threatened, like Solomon, which was the head monkey, and when their status is low. And he showed that depressed humans are flooded with the very same stress hormone that you find in low-ranking male baboons. So some other scientists began to suspect that depression might be in part something deep in our animal nature. So yes, so kind of like the psychologist Paul Gilbert started to make the case that depression is for humans in part a submission response, the evolutionary equivalent of Job, which is the baboon at the bottom of the hierarchy saying, no, no more, please leave me alone. You don't have to fight me. I'm no threat to you. And after I learned about this, I began to wonder, especially as I interviewed many depressed people, if depression is in part a response to the sense of humiliation of the modern world inflicts on many of us. Watch TV and you'll be told that the only people who count in the world are celebrities and the rich, and you already know your chances of joining either group are vanishingly small. Flick through an Instagram feed or a glossy magazine and your normal shaped body will feel disgusting to you. Go to work and you'll have to obey the whims of a distant boss earning hundreds of times more than you. Even when we are not being actively humiliated, even more of us feel like our status could be taken away at any moment. Even the middle class, even the rich are being made to feel pervasively insecure. Robert had discovered that having an insecure status was one thing even more distressing than having a low status. So it seemed like there might be something in the theory that depression and anxiety are a response to the constant status anxiety many of us live with this today. But how can this theory be tested? So then he goes on to talk about ways that was tested. Again, you got to read the book. I only have actually 8 minutes, which just went by really quickly. So I want to get through the other ones. So slightly off topic, but Defunctland has a great documentary a few months ago about the Disney Channel. But in it, he explains the strict lag of how it has to be clearly differentiated from normal broadcasting. These guidelines apply to all. I'm like, oh, okay. What is it on? I might check it out. I was sad about Vice, guys. I used to love Vice documentaries on YouTube. Yes, the difference between insecure status versus low. I think there was as a lawyer, what is your opinion on pirating books like this via torrenting? My opinion is that unless like you really can't afford it, I don't think it's right, because it's a book. These are artists. These are people. Buy the book, buy the ebook, listen to it. Stealing is stealing. So it's not my opinion as a lawyer. It's my opinion as a person. If you're going to steal from anybody, like go steal a fucking toothbrush from Target. Don't steal people's work. That's what I think. I think there was a quote that I wanted to read. Okay, yeah. When you have a society with huge gaps in income and status, this is a quote from the book, Richard Tormley, it creates the sense that some people seem supremely important and others seem of no importance at all. This doesn't only affect the people at the bottom. In a highly unequal society, everyone has to think about their status a lot. Am I maintaining my position? Who's threatening me? How far can I fall? Just asking these questions as you have to when inequality grows, loads more and more stress into our lives. I think this is something, even me, I'm not somebody that's been on the low end, but so I'm always like, oh my God, can I continue to make this? Can I continue to do this? Does everyone's like, oh my God, you're not going to be able to do this forever, which is true. I think that brings me some stress sometimes. There's a lot of these books that can be digitally borrowed from your library if you have an e-reader app. Yeah. Don't steal books, guys. Like there's libraries, you go support your library. Go go to the library. That's actually good for you. Hey, Jazz, hope all has been well. Yes. Does Vice not do documentaries anymore? Vice is going bankrupt, if you haven't heard, which is really sad because I think Vice back in the day used to be where it's at. They have some of the most interesting fucking documentaries I've ever seen. All right. Cause 6, this is one I'm working on, disconnection from the natural world. So nature, get outside. This is touch grass. I needed to hear this. A lot of interesting stuff in here. He talks about how even like animals who are depressed in the wild will show signs of depression, but they're never as intense as the depression they see animals in the zoo face, which again makes you sad. Like I grew up thinking zoos were like so great, and then when I got older I was like, this I don't know about this. But animals who get depressed in the zoo get really depressed, and human beings, we do need to be outside. We do need to be in nature. He talks about how they did a study where or they looked at people who went from like a city to somewhere with more nature and vice versa, and almost everybody who moved somewhere where they were going to experience more of the natural world became happier, and the other way they did it. So big reminder to me, I was not a nature girl. I want my heels, I don't want my hikes, but I think it's so good for me to get outside, go for walks, hear, see, experience the natural world. Canopy has some best free streaming, and all you need is an active library card. In other words, get a library card. Okay, I want to, what is cost 7? Disconnection from a secure future, hopeful or secure future. This is kind of ties into a lot of the stuff we're talking about, but people who, you know, countries where we don't have things like healthcare, or in the end, he advocates strongly for universal basic income, and he uses Canada and a couple other places that, or some on a smaller scale, that have implemented it, at least temporarily, and how much of a difference that made in people's lives. People felt like they could actually pursue the things that they wanted to do instead of just thinking about how they're going to survive, how they're going to feed their families and their kids. So this is just another reason that capitalism and having such great wealth inequality sucks. That was number 7. Again, I recommend the book. A lot we can all learn from it. A lot I'm going to come back to and try to implement more of in my life. And Jasmine, is it almost time for you to be on your OnlyFans? Yes, 2 minutes actually. I've done a far few nature activities, sometimes hard to find time to do, but I love being out in nature and doing stuff outside. Yeah, so I feel like you guys are, at least those of you that I talked to, I don't know if Fate's in here, but he works outside. He's a blacksmith. Hazard, I think, gets outside decently, like a decent amount. I don't, so this is something I need to work on. Okay, so I just have a couple minutes left, but if anyone has any last words they want to say, my point with this is that everyone's talking about, oh my God, we're becoming so unhappy. It's because we're not this and we're not that. And this book gives you some actually scientifically backed reasons outside of just a chemical imbalance, etc., that could be making us as a society less and less connected, which is affecting our mental and physical health, and ways that we could change that. You don't have to hate gay people and make women go back to the kitchen in order to fix this problem that we're having in the West. I don't think that is necessarily the solution. Hope to see you too, and wishing you all the best for the horse riding farm. I legit ordered the book from Amazon during the stream. Thanks for the recommendation. I hope you like it. It's good, and it's a really easy read. I was reading a really challenging book before this. I was reading The Moral Landscape, which is a good book, but like it would take me so, like this, you can like it seems like a big book, but you could, and not like even that big, but like his writing style is just very like anybody can read it. And it's really good. So let me know what you think, Drake. And I will continue to do book recommendations. I'm working on a book right now, Sex and the Constitution, which goes through the way sex has been regulated by kind of a bunch of institutions from very early on. And once I finish that, I'll probably do like a stream on the things I've learned. I just hate how we don't have time to read all the books we want to read. And so reading to me is something I'm trying to be more consistent with. Do you guys keep in touch through Instagram? How do you stay connected outside of Twitch? So Hazard and I talk, and I talk to Drake on my OnlyFans. I talk to a lot of you through my OnlyFans or my Snapchat, mostly my OnlyFans. We also have a Discord group that I hope we can be more active in. Let's give John, I'll have my moderator DM you the link to join our Discord group. A few of us are in there. And discussing Plato's Republic when. Do you guys want to do Plato's Republic? I gotta refresh my mind on that one. I just read 5 dialogues not long ago, though. I'd love to join Discord. Okay. My moderator will privately message you the link. And yeah, I'll be back next Monday for a new topic. Hope probably doing the Supreme Court stuff unless I feel compelled to do something else like I did today. And I am late. My fans are waiting. So if you guys are going to go to the fun live, time to switch gears, time to get in sexy mode, and I will see you there. I also have I can't show you the toys, but I have, we're going to switch it up. We're going to get a little spicier on today's live potentially. So see you there.